Yes, sir. It is a jam-packed post-Christmas Day victory, 122-115. The Nets taking care of the Lakers, led by James Harden. We're going to break down the triple-double from Sir James, the big plays between him and Nic Claxton, really just the supporting cast of veterans that helped lift the Nets over the Lakers, including one Patty Mills, who continues to provide the Nets with the gluttony of problems, having another incredible, potentially sixth man of the year award-winning shooter on their roster. Doug, it was a beautiful way to tie a bow on the holiday.
Oh, I was just gonna say that we made it all the way through the podcast without making a Christmas pun, and then you threw the bow thing in there at the end. My whole lead-in was gonna be about how we didn't make a single Christmas pun for the entire
Starting
episode
now.
without. Well, yeah, starting. There will be no more after this because we recorded the beats after. We're gonna get into it all, but first, the theme music.
Oh, dude, come
on. You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right. Welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am at Adam Armbrecht covering the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. He is Doug Norrie at Doug Norrie, Blue Checkmark certified, and also owner-operator DFSR for all your daily fantasy sports rankings. FanDuel, DraftKings, if you need daily projections, he's got you covered over there. We're going to get into it all, sir, after we remind people we appreciate them making us their first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms. Christmas Day game, obviously, Brooklyn Nets, LA Lakers. We'll get to the 122-115 victory. But how are we feeling, sir, after the what we like to call fallout from the holiday weekend?
Oh man, I'm recovering. It's all good. Like, family running all over the place, making sure all the projections are set for Christmas Day. Make sure you can watch all the games, make sure all the presents get taken care of, make sure everyone, make sure the beef tenderloin got cooked. Delicious.
Sure.
On on Christmas Eve night. Just wearing a ton of hats and still super pumped that the Nets just like turned in an awesome one on Christmas Day on a game that, going in, as I previewed the game the day before, was a game that the game wasn't in doubt, but the quality probably was in doubt going in, and that ended up not being a problem at all.
I glazed the crap out of a ham, just in case anybody's wondering. But so the Nets, come into that game, as you say, the Nets start to get a couple guys back: James Harden, Bruce Brown, James Johnson. So you start to get this influx of the veterans for the Brooklyn Nets. But before we do get specifically into the game, Harden, Patty Mills, even some of the great play from Nic Claxton, it became a very exciting game, at least for me. But I wondered if, when you see this on the slate, there's a lot of different things between who's going to be available for either side of it. Then the Lakers haven't exactly had the type of season people anticipated. Is it still possible, do you think, for like general NBA fans to get pumped up about a Christmas Day game that doesn't necessarily have all the star boxes checked that you need going into it? Can a good enough game be good enough to make people have fun watching it?
I mean, like LeBron, you're halfway home with that, probably. Yeah. Like if it's LeBron, if it's Curry. I mean, Curry wasn't on this game, but he was in the other game. But with him, you're probably pretty much there. Harden has a pretty big following. It's not Durant, but it's probably pretty close. I think in terms of quality matchup, I felt going into this game that this was good enough. And like, I don't know, we're speaking in these COVID-y times where nothing is safe when it comes to who's going to play in the game. My feeling going in, looking at the Nets starting lineup, that was some approximation of guys who've basically been playing for the team minutes. And I think these days, I'm not like saying this lately, these days, that is kind of good enough because there's just so many teams have ruled so many guys out that when you get Harden, Mills, Claxton's a guy who's probably starting no matter what. You get LeBron, you get Westbrook, for whatever he is at this point. And most of that starting lineup for the Lakers was actually pretty much short of Davis, but he's hurt from non-COVID stuff. Like he's actually just hurt. Right. So that you get some approximation of what their team was. I felt pretty satisfied going in about where this game landed in terms of the talent pool. Because I think that was a huge worry, but I did not. By the time the ball was tipped, that was so far from a thought in my mind.
Well, so along the way in this one, at one point, the Brooklyn Nets were up 20, late in the third quarter, going into the fourth quarter. It ends up getting a lot closer, obviously, and we end up with a really good game, which I think does matter from a pure fan standpoint of the league. Like, it's okay
really
as long as as long as it ends up being a good game, right? Even if you're surprised that the Nets end up blowing out the Lakers, that can still take some of the gas out of it. Even if it's the Stars, it takes a lot of the wind out of it. So the fact this thing ends up getting tighter at the end is really important. The Nets winning this one, also making them 12-3. That's an NBA best record on the road. And they do it, to your point, pseudo short-handed. But the first thing that I thought, as we got a triple-double from James Harden in this one, was going back to when you didn't have Durant for rest purposes and Harden couldn't lead the Nets to a win over the Houston Rockets. Then Durant gets his turn with all these young rookies. The Nets have some success. You get a handful of games postponed. It felt good that it was James Harden leading what ends up being a veteran cast of Brooklyn Nets primarily, but him kind of taking charge and leading the team, because we know he's kind of had this up and down season as far as finding his rhythm. This was a really solid game for him.
He looked great. He was there for the stage. This is exactly what you wanted to see from him. It's frankly amazing that he had that many days off and came back and played like this, because out with COVID protocols, you're not practicing, you're not playing, you're not doing anything else. To step right back out on the court and just play close to 39 minutes and drop a triple-double and look arguably as good as you've looked the entire season, it was kind of just amazing. He was fully in his bag. He was getting to the rim. He got a couple of these kind of crazy, just kind of throw him up shots where he thought he was getting fouled, but they went in. The step back three was working for him. He was getting guys around the perimeter and kind of just taking his game to them, which is what he needs to be doing to be really effective. And the Lakers just are really compromised defensively. So this was a good situation for him. But in all, to have sat out that many days, and then 15 days he had played. Man, that's even longer than I thought. I thought it was shorter. So that was his first game in more than 2 weeks. And to do that was nothing short of amazing. Like, it's such a great sign for him, for a guy that we've been, a little bit worried on in the context of James Harden, right? Like, is his game fully there? This game, it's so quick about how NBA can change this for you, because this game totally erases that almost like immediately. It's like, oh no, never mind, he's fine. Like, he sat out 2 weeks, and he had the best Christmas Day performance basically of anybody. And if you're the rest of the NBA, you're looking at that and thinking, oh no, we don't need this to happen. Like, we don't need to get this guy arrested and then get fully into his bag, because he was definitely there, this guy in this one.
Is this just affirmation then that, like, for a lot of the Nets, I mean, whether it's Kevin Durant, who's primarily been phenomenal in every single game that he's played this season, but for James Harden, and you mentioned, it's like Blake Griffin when we talk about him, all these are all different levels of importance to the team, but all older players, all needing some level of rest, it seems like, to be at their best. Like, okay, and we actually talked about this when we were saying Kyrie Irving's return potentially, of what do you wonder about with a long layoff for him and getting on the court? You say, well, most offensive talents, especially at that level, can just kind of get back into the rhythm pretty quickly. And James Harden showed that after 2 weeks off. It seems like rest is the most crucial thing that you can give to any of these guys to make sure that they're going to be able to get it done as we move through.
For sure. I think that's good. We've been talking about this, but this is a theme for this year. These guys were playing too many minutes. They're all old by NBA standards. And when you're this old, it pays to be able to just not play. And if someone's just going to force you to sit down, that's not always the worst thing in the world. And I think this Durant layoff will probably also pay dividends, just forcing you out of the lineup. Right? Like, because look, Durant will play 40 minutes in this game. It's a Christmas. He'll play 40 minutes in every game. Like, he's just Durant. Like, that's what he wants to do. And forcing these guys out of the lineup for a few days or weeks. Do I think the policies, whatever it is? Yeah. But like, in the end, this is actually probably going to be a boon for the Nets, especially that they just got these guys forced out. And it also shines a light on that the consistency around the team is so good that this group, because Bruce Brown and Bembry, none of these guys, James Johnson, all these guys have been out with protocols. They all stepped in and played really, really well. It's just a testament to a good organization that, has a lot of consistency, has a superstar. They have a hierarchy. There's no doubting what the hierarchy around talent is. And so, it's Harden first. He leads the team. We're all role players. With Durant's out, we're all role players, and this is what we're going to do. And that was like kind of the theme of this entire game, was just this top-down hierarchy of everyone knows their roles, and they were able to, take home an on the road victory in a place that's tough to play on the road on Christmas Day in LA, full crowd. That crowd's going nuts, especially when they're coming back, and they're able to pull it out. This is a great win. This is one of the best wins of the year for sure.
Yeah, it's funny that you don't, or at least I didn't go in with a lot of anticipation about being results oriented, given everything that we talk about coming into it. And then when they get the win, you start to go, or maybe this is a bigger deal than I thought it was going to be. Going to get into some of the key late sequences from this one. You mentioned a lot of the supporting cast, including, of course, Patty Mills. Want to ask you a question there as well. But before we do, got to tell you about our friends over at Truebill, because it's the new app, guys. It's going to help you identify and stop paying for the subscriptions that you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. We all do it. You lock into a subscription. First month's going to be free. Next 30 years of your life at $95 a month. No, friends. On average, Truebill is going to save you up to $720 a year. And that's because companies make subscriptions hard to cancel. Truebill makes it incredibly simple. Just link your accounts and Truebill will cancel your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And Truebill even has a concierge in there that will help you negotiate for a better rate on the subscriptions that you want to keep. Truebill has over 2 million users and helped to save them over $100 million. Don't fall for all the subscription scams out there. Start canceling today at Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now to Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. Truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. So we've got James Harden out there, 13-17 at the line, by the way. I feel like one of the other things that we take away, and this has happened now going back a couple of weeks when he was on the court, where you've seen now he's made that adjustment. He's finding ways to be aggressive and get himself to the line and get some of those quote-unquote free points. He's also karate chopping Horton Tucker in the groin to try to get some space on the offensive end, looking for a triple. That's neither here nor there. Whatever gets the job done. The other piece is, though, the Nets were up in this one, as I said, up by 20. Looked like it was going to be going away. The Lakers come back. LeBron James is LeBron James. And you end up 115-115. And I think highlighting what ends up being one of the closing sequences, which is the connection between Harden and Nic Claxton, is pretty important, because we've also talked about that all year long in the absence of Claxton, saying that's kind of the relationship you want to see develop over the course of this year, because that's the easiest way for Claxton to start to give you some offensive upside to go along with everything he does on the other end.
Yeah, like that ended up becoming the defining moment of the game. And if you weren't watching, it was the last sequence of the game. Basically, that was important for the Nets, where the game is tied and they run a late action pick and roll, where Harden just throws a lob up to Claxton, who LeBron comes to recover on a help, but it's like just a second too late, and Claxton elevates over him. And it's one of these dunks where, like, it's sort of a dunk in definition only, because I don't think his hands ever touched the rim. He kind of just threw the ball at the rim, but it looks like a poster, and it basically
full extension reach, and then just a drop into the basket.
Oh yeah, and it's just kind of like the momentum of the ball takes it, but it ends up becoming the defining moment of the game, because it's, young Nic Claxton basically posterizing LeBron James on Christmas Day to hammer home the win. And if we're looking at what we want Claxton to be as a player, especially when it comes to, like you said, pairing him with James Harden, he needs to be a pick and roll guy that's going to be able to get to the rim with power. It has not always been something he's been able to do consistently. His finishing around the rim has been inconsistent at best. And we've known this for a while, but this is exactly, we saw there was actually, if there's a bunch of little examples of this game, this obviously was the best one, but there were a few other times he had a couple of dives early in the game that looked really, really good. He had a couple of short rolls where he passed out of the short roll really well, which is the exact read that you want him to be able to make, because that's going to be really important for keeping the defense honest. So look, we said it 2 podcasts ago about Nic Claxton. We were referencing another podcast that talked about this, but being an X factor for the team, he is a really, really important player for them. I thought he played really well. The stat line will not totally reflect it, because he was, 9.6 rebounds in only 32 minutes, or excuse me, only those things in 32 minutes. But overall, you have to walk away from that game being so encouraged. Big stage, all of his assignments were pretty much kept, and then he makes the defining play of the game. Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. It was so, and I know Nets fans had an absolute field day with that with that GIF the next day because it's worth it. That's a probably arguably will be one of the best moments of his whole career when we look back on it, because it really was that cool of just considering who was involved, just how cool the moment was.
Oh, he's got bigger moments coming up in the NBA Finals later in this postseason, Doug. GIF or GIF? The debate continues. Hit us up in the comments.
What did I say? I said GIF.
You say GIF. I say, yeah. I say, what do I say? I say GIF. Yeah. I say it's a GIF.
I think you say it wrong. We keep going. Okay.
Anything can happen, but I think you're right. And the funny thing about Nic Claxton's stat line, just because you say it's not the sexiest thing when you look at the box score, but one thing, 5 blocks, that obviously jumps off the screen at you, and that's the defensive piece of it. But you even said some of the passing on the offensive end. He had 3 assists in this game, and that's something that you can't look past, because when we've talked about before, Blake Griffin getting back into the rotation for a little stint here. And we know as a veteran player that he's capable of setting some guys up, or at least making the right basketball play, the right basketball read. Any of these younger players that we were highlighting when the Nets were depleted going the other direction with all rookies and no veterans, and includes Nic Claxton in that bunch of, if you can start to show the aptitude, right, and making the extra pass, making that little extra right play, it's just building confidence with James Harden, with Kevin Durant when he's back on the floor. And you do need that reliability. That's one of the reasons why I think you have this veteran-heavy team that would probably love nothing more than to see younger guys have more prominent and permanent roles in this team going forward, because the athleticism, the youth, right, the energy is probably better on that side. But you need to have the trust. Even if some guys are diminished, you at least know that Blake Griffin makes the right NBA play more often than not. So things like this are important for Claxton in that regard too, I think.
I think too, with this game, it was pretty apparent that Steve Nash, even though they had something more of a bench in this game, like they had a few more players available just because everyone got off protocols sort of at the right time. And even with that, we saw that Nash essentially saw that the group that he was going to need to work with, or at least the core group, was going to be Harden, Mills, Bruce Brown, who played a ton of minutes, and he was also great, and Nic Claxton. Like, those guys all played 32 minutes plus in this one, and we didn't see, like, we saw some shorter stints from, and it was basically Bembry and James Johnson swapped the last piece of meaningful minutes. James Johnson ended up closing, but they basically picked their lane early with these lineup and then just went with it. And I think that was a good sign too. And that's especially a good sign for guys like Brown and Claxton, because it shows that the trust is there around being able to sort of, well, one, close a game, but two, that this combination specifically of players around James Harden is going to work. Because you always got to think about this team, and you got to think about it in terms of Kevin Durant, but you have to think about it about really only one way: who works best with the superstars. Like, that's really the only thing that it's like the only thing that you wonder about the Nets. It does not matter. Other combinations are fun to talk about for the regular season because the regular season is long. In the grand scheme of things, the only thing that matters is who can play with those two guys. And I'll throw in Kyrie Irving for when he comes back. Like, that's all that matters. If you can play with those guys, that and the pairings are going to work, the combos are going to work, then you are going to be on this team and play meaningful minutes. If it doesn't, then you're done. Like, that's it. Sometimes it's that easy. And so if you look at Claxton, and we're going to talk about Mills at length here in a second, I think, but like, if you look at Claxton that way and say, can he play lots of meaningful minutes with James Harden? Obviously. And when you answer that question, then you say, then he has a long-term role in the team. And that's it. And like, I hate to make basketball that easy sometimes, but sometimes it is just that easy. Are you good with James Harden? Good. Then you're good. Then you're kind of good. Like, and if you're not, then maybe not.
I was gonna say, because guess what? If you're on the other side of that spectrum on the Brooklyn Nets, and you go, boy, you just don't seem to have chemistry with James Harden. You don't seem to have chemistry with Kevin Durant. It's probably not going to pan out for you so well. Just quickly, because like you said, we're going to get into Patty Mills in a very deep dive here because of how good he was in this game, how good he has been all season. But the combination between Bruce Brown and then you also mentioned DeAndre Bembry, they go for 64 minutes in this game. They combine for 12 of 17 from the field. They give you 11 total rebounds together, and you're talking about 31 total points. In a game like this, when both of those players, you think about defensive first and the impact they can have on this game, it's incredibly important that they can do the lift the other way. And to your point, play off of James Harden effectively. So really good games from the both of them. Got to get into Patty Mills, though, because this feels almost like he's starting to enter the category in his role of, yeah, well, that's just what Patty Mills does. But before we do, we know that he must be bulking up with some Built Bars.
Oh, baby. Holiday season wrapping up here. You're probably heading into like trying to get a little healthier. I know I am. Maybe you're still on the run too, following the post-holiday stuff. You're getting back to work. You got to check out Built Bar. Built Bar started with the flavors to make sure that there'd be something that would hit for you. There's been multiple debates in the Locked On NBA group thread about what the best Built Bar flavor is. Cookies and cream, peanut butter, brownie, cherry, double chocolate, raspberry, mint, brownie. The list goes on. They figured out that if you make this thing taste good, then you can kind of work in the healthy stuff later. And that's exactly what Built Bar did. They covered it with chocolate, but they loaded it with protein, kept the calories and sugar low. So you don't need to feel guilty powering down these things. Even if you're just catching it as a snack, maybe replacing a meal, Built Bar has you covered. You go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off of your order. You have to use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at built.com.
All right, so we said it. This game needed people to step up. Guy that's been doing it all season long. It's Patty Mills. I feel like even though we came out of the offseason, everyone agreed, whether you're a Brooklyn Nets fan or a fan of the NBA, going, man, Nets got to steal. And there's also no way that the bar was set as high as Patty Mills has set it for himself now this year. He continues to surprise me with how consistent he's been able to play so far this season. And it's not insignificant because this is another example. 11-17 gives you 34 points, knocks down 8-13 from beyond the arc. He does them in ways, his off-balance shots coming off of the rolls off of the baseline. Like, he's doing it in superstar kind of fashion. Do you continue to be surprised by how good he has been this year for the Nets?
I mean, when he drops 34 points on Christmas Day, I would say I didn't probably think that was part of what you were signing him on for. I thought he was going to be a nice role player. That's why he was, sixth man of the year candidate. He was going to be coming off the bench, hitting some shots, be able to be really good in the catch and shoot, be able to be available for, we thought maybe a little ball handling, but not really. And then he, just has arguably his best game as a net on the biggest stage, which we already know he's played on before. Like, this guy's played in big games in the past. And so it's not like that part is a new thing for him. I did think there was something really interesting in terms of just narrative that happened in this game with Patty Mills, as opposed to who was, we'll call him the big net signing in the offseason, right? Like, that was the signing that we were the most excited about because they didn't do a ton, but that's a really nice guy to get. So a couple funny things happened with this. One, Patty Mills after the game gets asked if his free agency came down to the Nets, and this is per Brian Lewis from the New York Post. He says that if his free agency came down to the Nets and the Lakers, and he just said, not really. So I thought that was really interesting to throw cold water on. Maybe this Lakers team wasn't the destination that, I wonder, it seems like maybe others could see like him, like, oh, the writing's on the wall here. This team isn't as good as what I'm going to get in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Couple that with Mills's game is great, but the key sequence where he hits a corner three late in the game when this game's really going back and forth, that the reason he was able to hit this three, and you can go find this on Twitter or pretty much anywhere now, is that Russell Westbrook, who was the Lakers' big offseason acquisition in terms of the trade, just looks absolutely lost on defense. Like, he is trying to sort of go rogue on defense, Westbrook, and he's trying to shoot a lane, and he's really not paying attention to Patty Mills, and he kept disconnected with him, and Mills just rolls to the corner and shoots his three. And I thought it was such a cool story of the game because you have Russell Westbrook, who is obviously a great player, but is probably not helping the Lakers at this point. But he's a much bigger star than Patty Mills. Except that when it comes down to technically doing the right things in the final moments, like, Patty Mills is not someone you need to worry about. And he hits his huge shot because Russell Westbrook's sort of technical ability in big moments is questionable. And I thought it was like, oh, they made a huge, like, would the Lakers just be better if they had just focused their resources on just bringing in Patty Mills, who would probably pair with LeBron really well, instead of Westbrook? And then you get the sequence where Westbrook just absolutely does an F- on defense and lets Mills kind of leak to the corner for three, and he makes it. And I thought that was just for, a third of the, or that's the third of the money, a fifth of the money, and at basically the same age. I think the Lakers would probably take a Patty Mills do-over at this point, like, with the way their sequence is going. And it kind of came through in one sequence.
Well, it's interesting. It's actually a really good point because, like, I do think that as superstars get older, depending on what level you're at, and at a point, Russell Westbrook was a superstar in the NBA, but superstars don't have to necessarily have the all-around game, all the facets, right? You don't have to be as locked in on every component of your game because you're usually the driving force. Maybe you end up, with OKC for a while by yourself, where all you're worried about is being ball dominant, getting your shot, getting your looks. And as you age out a little bit, and you go to the Lakers and you say, well, if you can kind of adjust your role a little, like Russell Westbrook can adjust his role. He doesn't have those things in his bag at this point. And listen, he's had a long career. He's been fatigued. Whereas Patty Mills, who's kind of always been a career, I'll say Alfred, right? Not even Robin, a career next level guy that's really important to a lot of teams, but never asked to be the leader of a team. All of a sudden now at this stage of his career, it's kind of like, yeah, guess what? Like I've been shot ready my entire career. And now, even though in this game you don't have Kevin Durant, now I'm being paired with the best team that I've ever been a part of. All of a sudden, everything that I do really well looks that much better because every opportunity is that much better. And it just, I get to play a crisper game, a cleaner game, and a more relied upon game. So it is interesting. Yeah, I think the Lakers would have done that in a heartbeat, right? I mean, how many teams would have gone back to this offseason if they could have said, we'll give Patty Mills X amount more just to get him in here for what he could mean for this team. That's a really good point, Doug. I got to tell you.
By the way,
take away the Nuggets.
And just so I only use plus minus when I cherry pick it to make my point, and then I don't use it. I don't use it if it doesn't make my point, and that's because it's mostly a silly stat. But in this game where Patty Mills, drops 34, looks like he just can't miss. Adds 7 assists. He was a plus 19 in this game. Russ was a minus 23 in this game, and I don't think I'm definitely cherry picking it because I know I do that with plus minus, but I do think it's representative of sort of what is working in the modern NBA. And what's not around when you are not the best player on your team, when you are not the superstar alpha on your team, what level, like what skill set works next best? And Patty Mills' skill set works next best around these other guys, and Russ just doesn't. And and that's just, it's sad because I love Westbrook and he's been one of my favorite players to watch for a long time. So it's really not a knock on Westbrook. Like he's a Hall of Famer. It's been great. He's super fun to watch. Like his motor is among the best ever. So it's not, I'm really trying not to knock him here. It's not that.
No, but I can name 12 teams right now that you would love to see Russell Westbrook on. It's about on the Lakers with LeBron James, right? About being in a supporting role that diminishes whatever his value is.
And that's where you can just see this juxtaposition between these two guys, right? Like, and it comes through in these small little plays about what in the small moments when it really needs to matter, are you doing all the right things? And I think that's such a great thing for, just to bring it back to Patty Mills specifically here, that's such a great thing that we've already seen so far with Patty Mills. And you just know that when the stage is big and shots need to go down and you need someone to do the right thing, it's very clear that come championship time, he will be on the court, right? Yep. Maybe not 35 minutes a game, but you will not be worried about the X amount of minutes that he plays because his game is just really well suited to A, the modern NBA, and B, to just like smart teams that need to do the right things in big moments.
44% from beyond the arc this season with the Brooklyn Nets. Highest percentage of his career. He hadn't hit over 40% from deep going all the way back 6 years, 2016-17, when he was with the San Antonio Spurs. The interest you mentioned there about he's going to be on the court in big moments for the Brooklyn Nets. As we look ahead here, and this is a positive problem to have, but has now Patty Mills effectively impacted the way the Brooklyn Nets will look at and utilize Joe Harris when he gets back? Because you have to at least look at, and this is the fair part. You and I have we've pushed back about the idea of Joe Harris has a bad playoff series and all of a sudden you scrap him. No, and he already showed early in this year prior to injury that he was back to knocking down shots at a high clip. But Patty Mills has shown you that he can knock down really important shots when they matter most, something that Joe Harris to this point has seemed to struggle with a little bit. Does this change how you look at the way you want to structure things when Joe gets back healthy?
No, because I think that still probably comes down to matchup, because I think we'll still see situations where teams will pick on Patty Mills on the defensive end. We saw this a couple times this year. I think one was the Warriors. Shoot. I wasn't prepped for this one. There was a game where they played, maybe it was the Suns, where they played, and it was very clear that they were just kind of calling his number out each time defensively because he is very small. So I think there are going to be games where you will see that part of it hurt him a little bit. if you were making me choose which guy that to hit a big three at the end of the game, I'd probably have to choose Patty Mills at this point. And we love Harris, but I think I just think, I don't know. Maybe I'm recency bias on this too, because he just had such a good game, and poor Joe is sitting on the bench. But no, I think you'd have to choose him. I think, but again, it's just a good problem to have, because I think that there will be matchups where you'd probably rather have Harris and a little more length, even though he's not a great defender. You still rather have a little more size from him than Patty Mills. But I think they're just going to be walking into a situation where they are able to probably pick and choose their spots, and I think in general you'd feel good about it all. And it's just awesome, man. Like it's just, we knew that this Mills signing was going to be good. He's proven it every game so far. It's been all good, and this just to have it on the biggest stage. Yeah, it was awesome. It was what a Christmas. It was just everything you want out of a Christmas Day game. The game was awesome.
Right. By the way, on a Christmas Day, after you've done the whole thing with the family, and you get to just like shut it down by the end of the night and sit back and watch this. This is exactly what we wanted to see. Great games from Harden and Patty Mills and the entire supporting cast. So it was awesome from start to finish. The Nets have the Clippers next up on tap. There's already some indications out there about who's not going to be available. It's basically the entire list of guys you didn't see available for the Lakers game. So more of the same in terms of who's going to be leading this team and trying to get another victory. We'll break all that down on the back end of the post game. And of course, as we thank you for making the Locked On Nets podcast your first listen, make that second listen Locked On Bets with your boy Q and expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free, just like our show, and available on all those platforms.
All right, and make sure you go over to YouTube. We've been pumping this because we're really excited about the growth over on YouTube, trying to get to 1,000 followers. Go and check out the Locked On Nets YouTube channel. All the episodes are going up there and more. I will put the link in the show notes, but go and follow Locked On Nets over on YouTube.
The most powerful weapon on earth is the human soul on fire. Ferdinand Foch.
I was going to say atomic bomb, but that human soul thing does sound pretty darn powerful. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.